Hi, this is Paul Ritchie. This interview with Erol Otus is a part of a series for the 30th anniversary of Star Control, the Ur-Quan Masters, focusing on the many talented people who helped create the game, besides me and Fred. Erol Otus is an artist, game designer, writer, and musician who for the last 40 years has worked on some of the biggest, best games of all time, as well as some of the most unusual ones. Erol's first published art was in 1977's Arduin Grimoire, one of the first successful role-playing supplements outside of Dungeons & Dragons. Most recently, Erol was a designer at Toys for Bob for over 15 years, helping to create Skylanders, one of the most successful game franchises of all time. How are you doing, Erol?
Oh, I'm doing very well. Thank you, Paul.
Good. So, full disclosure here, I had the insane good fortune to meet Erol at high school in 1976 when I was 15, and without his talent and friendship, I would never have become a game designer at all.
I'm glad you remembered that. I actually don't remember the exact date. I've been puzzling over that. That's good.
Yeah. I think so.
I think that's about right.
We were just learning to drive. That was a very key time in our lives. So I'm going to start off with a pretty broad question, which is, who are you, and what games and other things have you worked on?
I'm Erol Otus, and I've worked on, I guess, best known for starting with Dungeons & Dragons, both advanced versions, basic and expert. And then I had a chance to work on Ur-Quan as a playtester. Then The Last Ninja, Starflight 2, which was a great game. Did some artwork for that. Star Control 1 as a playtester. And then quite a few things for Star Control 2. That was a great experience. Also a couple of Star Trek games, a Final Unity and Generations. A couple of Mech Warrior games, Mech Commander and Mech Warrior 3. And then several small conversions of board games for Games.com. Scrabble, Monopoly, Battleship, and others. Then Disney Skate at TFB, Madagascar, Tony Hawk's Downhill Jam, Madagascar 2. Also several paper RPGs, doing artwork for those. Dungeon Crawl Classics role-playing game, Swords and Wizardry. And also quite a while ago, Alma Mater, and Hackmaster. And then most recently, the Skylanders series of video games, Skylanders, Skylanders Giants, Trap Team, and lastly, and perhaps bestly, Imaginators.
Great. So let's go back to Star Control 2. Actually, first let's go back to Star Control 1, because I believe you did do some art on that, if I recall. I was looking through some of the big still pictures that were done for each spaceship, and the Unga stood out to me as looking like something that you may have illustrated.
Oh, you're right. That was on the computer, I think.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, okay. What were those used for? I actually don't remember.
There was I can't remember what I edit in what it actually is. But there were these, you could go look at ships, and it would give you a nice big picture of the spaceship and then readouts of its weapons and a little bit of kind of flair and flavor text.
Okay.
Because we didn't have that much story, and we didn't have the places to sort of show the background of the aliens, and that was one of the places.
Yeah. Well, I would. I'm seeing that in my mind's eye, and I'd love if you have can link me to that or point me to that image at some point. That would be really cool.
You betcha. I just so happen to have been looking at everything Star Control 2 related in Star Control 1. So tell me a little bit about what you remember doing for Star Control 2. Now, I think you're primarily known as an artist, but you contributed to the game in more ways, in more categories than anybody else. When you think back to the work you did, what stands out?
Well, the main thing were the alien view screen pictures, and those were really a lot of fun to do, and were done both with painting, acrylic painting, and then digitally. And then they were scanned in and animations added by Paul and team. So that was the main thing that I did, and that was some pretty cool images came out of that. But there was also a little music. I did what ended up being the Ur-Quan theme. And that was also a lot of fun to do. It was composed on an emulator 2, was a sampler, big back in the day. It had an 8-track sequencer on it, and that's how that theme was created. And then there was some writing for some different dialogue that the aliens would speak, and then some recording for the audio of the Chimur, which was sort of a robotic voice, kind of an homage to something from Star Trek. I can't remember exactly which one it was, but
Guardian of Forever, or
I don't know. Yeah. Was that the two? There were so many cool robotic voices in Star Trek, but
there was the Lights of Zatar. They were kind of sounded like smooth Greek gods, if I recall. And there was Guardian of Forever, who definitely sounded like a big.
What did Nomad sound like? I don't remember that.
I am Nomad.
It made a little Nomad, but there's somebody else.
You are
or it's even more. Yeah, even more Chimur.
Oh, let's see. There was Blaylock. He had a nice big voice. There was. Let's see.
There's some research. Do some research.
Yeah, we got to do some research into that. Yeah, there was a lot of good voices in there. I don't know about you, but Star Trek is always running in my head. People are always asking me, "What do you think of this new show? What do you think of this new show?" And then compare it.
Yeah.
And I just say, I can't. That's a big part of what I'm running in my head is still Star Trek. And, you know, whenever I hear the boards creak or something like that, I just. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have said that. If you watch the old shows, you can hear the boards creak as they walk around, and once you hear it, you can't unhear it.
Oh, now I'll listen for it.
Forget that. Maybe we should wipe your memory of that one. But anyway, you should also I have been watching, of course, all things Star Trek, and the new series is really not easy to watch.
There's 2, right?
Well, yes, this is strangely symmetrical. There is a television show called Star Trek. It has some of the things that people do in Star Trek, and then it has, in my mind, some really dumb stuff.
Oh,
like the main conceit is a fungus drive. They drive the thing that makes their ship go, like their advanced super tech is fungus. Now, I know you're a fungus fan.
Yes, that is true, but I can see how it's a stretch to have it power. It's not just doesn't seem like a very energetic matter. And
also, I can imagine little circular spores like drying up and floating through space, but I don't think of some like network of anyway. Anyway, I may be deep overthinking this, but then there is the Orville.
It's a sort of a comedy one.
Yeah, but somehow it actually is more Star Trek. At least the way that my brain sees it.
Yeah, I haven't watched the show yet, but I've watched some KTVU, our local station that carries it, and the previews are shown there a lot. And it looks like Star Trek to me. I don't know.
Ship design's pretty good. Yeah, Channel 44, is that KBHK or KTV? KTVU is Channel 2.
Channel 2, that's the Oracle.
Starring Frank Somerville. But is it KBHK is Channel 44? Those 2 channels were really instrumental in one's childhood in the Bay Area.
And don't forget Channel 20. Ultraman was on Channel 20.
Oh, right.
Yeah, UHF. First time I realized there was other channels as a child. It was amazing, and Ultraman was there.
It took work, too. I remember to get it. You had to, you didn't go click, click, click. You had
No, you had to, yeah. It was like a radio tuner.
I wonder if people know what we're talking about. You actually had to learn to use TVs in the old days, and it was pretty fun. So we're talking about Star Control and your contributions. Yeah, you did a whole lot of traditional media paintings, which were then scanned and animated after the fact. And I was looking through the credits and getting into touch with all of the people who did that work. One guy I haven't yet reached out to is Kyle Balda, who did a whole lot of the animation on top of those communication screens. And I would get the paintings from you, and I would scan them in, and then I would leave them set up in Deluxe Paint for Kyle. And Kyle, I think, was working at LucasArts at the time, but he was a student at Cal Arts, and he would come up at night to the office and just sort of out of sight from us would do all of this animation. And we'd just show up in the morning, and it was done. So he was sort of our animation brownie.
Yeah.
And then I didn't see Kyle for a while. I knew he went off into traditional films, but then I recently kind of stumbled into him. He directed Minions most recently, one of the most successful movies of all time about those little yellow guys.
You're kidding me.
Nope. No, he's seems to be doing much better these days. But I do intend on getting in touch with him.
That's really cool. Huh.
Finding out what happened in the middle of the night when we weren't there when he was animating. But yeah, his stuff was great, and there was a lot of funny partnerships in Star Control. There was a lot of, some people were paid, some people were volunteers. I think a lot of the writing you did initially was volunteers.
Oh, yeah.
I hope you got paid for the paintings. I think
Yes, you did.
Okay,
You
good.
paid me for the paintings.
Humorously, I may have to get you to sign releases for those, but that's a longer story.
Okay.
And so in addition to the music that you did, and one of the things that's interesting, I think, about the music is we were moving from synthesized audio. If you go all the way back to the Atari 800 or the Commodore 64, you had these really early sound chips that had like a noise channel and a couple of different waveforms that you could select from. And then when the Amiga showed up, it introduced us all to digital, not just digital recording, but using digital samples to synthesize music. But you were using a professional audio kit to do that. Were there any bands at that time in the late 80s, early 90s that were using that same tech?
The emulator too? Oh yeah. It was that was a big sampler at the time. I mean, excuse me, I have to cough. Let's see.
Take this opportunity to sip.
Oh yes. Let's see who was using the E2. Steve Naive of Elvis Costello, Depeche Mode, Heaven 17. I mean, there was a lot. It was very popular. It was when it came out. It was the number one.
I remember
sampler.
Going to see The Residents, I think.
Oh,
with
The
you.
Residents, of
was
course.
Was that it? Okay, because
well,
I remember
they had the first emulator, I think, and they probably had the second one.
I just remember that they had sort of this like lockstep inserting of the floppy disks during their performance to get the next set of samples onto their machine, which was great.
Yes, a big floppy disk. Yep.
So when the Amiga came out, it introduced holding digital audio and playing it back samples and then manipulating the way those samples were played to create what sounded like a continuous piece of music. And that was the first time that Fred and I ran into that. It's called the mod file format. I believe it comes from Finland or from the European demo scene. But we first saw it, I believe, in a demo of Dune, one of the original Dune games. There was a great mod that sounded like the Desert Sands. And then Blood Money came out, and a number of other games from European, English, and Finnish and German teams using this mod format. And so we saw it as a great opportunity to make music that sounded different, but no one here knew how to make them as far as we could tell. But your format was sufficiently close that we were able to transcribe it.
I have no idea how you did that.
Some of it was by ear, and some of it was the magic of Fred Ford's programming. But that allowed us to see that there was a path to get composition done in the U.S. into the game. However, we ran out of people. Like, there was you, and then we just stumbled to find anyone else that we knew who had that same setup. And so we ended up finding out that most of the people who used the mod format were over in Europe. And we ended up having a music competition, which was a desperate attempt by us to get a whole lot of music from someone who is talented at a reasonable price. And maybe we'll do a whole separate recording podcast on that. But for me, the Ur-Quan theme always stood out as sort of this acme or exemplar of what we were looking for, which was power, not overly soft and electronic. And if you think about the color of pulp science fiction, there's some connection into audio that I felt like it was just a very bold, exciting piece. When you were making it, what were you thinking about?
Grimness and grandeur. That's it. I was thinking about, it's war, but it's also majesty and also, I don't know, not necessarily mystery, but space.
That's good. Well, space is a good place, full of grimness and majesty, I hope. Hope we can get there someday. The Ur-Quan were in the first game. I think actually the first theme you did was for the Amiga version of Star Control 1. I don't know if you recall that, but there was an Ur-Quan there was a hierarchy victory theme, and then there was an alliance victory theme. Do you recall those?
I'm afraid not.
Yeah, I actually haven't been able to track them down either, so we'll probably edit this part out. But what I do recall is at the end of it, the very first version of the theme I got was your voice going,
Star Control. Yeah, I think that's the same piece. Like the original sort of intent I had, and I'm glad it still worked out and was used, was for it to be the theme of the game in my egotistical mind. So yeah, I had that thing at the end. And again, I think it was wise to take that out because really it was a little too close to it's full of stars. You know, that's where I got it from the Space Odyssey sequel.
I thought it was pretty cool. We were just a little worried that the name wasn't going to end up being Star Control. But maybe we can resurrect that somehow for people to check out. So what else? Let's see. Let's talk a little bit about the Urs. Greg Johnson wrote the bulk of the Urs dialogue, but I remember handing him a document that you gave me, some cryptic tips and thoughts about the Urs, but there were no explanations. There was just words like happy campers.
Yeah. So I can't remember why it seemed to me that you probably described it. The Urs would be so cryptic and a little difficult to understand. But at the time, we had a vice president named Dan Quayle who exhibited to me a lot of these sort of same qualities and fragments of speech and thought that were difficult to understand. And happy campers, I think, was one of them he referred to. I don't remember who, but some people who were having a hard time as being okay because they were happy campers, and it just seemed so wrong.
Although it strangely seems to fit into modern political thinking quite well.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I don't want to get too deeply into politics, but Dan Quayle was just simply a foreshadowing of much more amazing things. But yeah, he helped me think about the Urs in I think a successful way, at least a genesis of how they might communicate.
Great. All right, so let's see. Original remake. As you said earlier, you did do the voice acting for the Chimera on the 3DO version. Was that the first time you had done voice acting?
For a final product. That is true, I think. Yeah.
Do you find voice acting comes naturally to you?
I guess, yeah. I mean, there's not, sometimes you don't need, I think so. Not a lot of thought goes into it before the voice comes out. It sort of like shows up.
Do you think being a DM for so many years helped that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It is performance on a scale that I'm comfortable with, right? With just a few people who aren't recording you, and it's a great tool to jump back and forth from the impartial presence or overseer of the real DM, and then a character who's interacting directly with the players. It's a lot of fun, and it adds interesting moments. I have to be careful, though, in playing with people who know me very, very well, like yourself. Sometimes when I jump into the character who's talking directly with the players, certain people get more information than I intended. So it's a vulnerable thing, but that's okay. That's part of the game. But yeah, the different voices for the characters or doing that while DMing is definitely help me hone some talent in that area.
Yeah, and you worked at Toys for Bob. You actually recorded more lines, I think, than any single other actor. Can you tell us a little bit about what voice you did in Star Control? Let me start that one over. Most people may not know that you not only did voice acting work in Skylanders, all of the games, but you probably have more lines than anybody else. Can you tell me who you played in Skylanders?
There were quite a few different characters, but the main one was a guy known as the Announcer, who came into being, I believe, during the creation of the PvP, player versus player mode for Skylanders. Skylanders is lighthearted and whimsical in many ways, and the announcer is a very serious guy, and that provided a nice kind of humorous contrast to a lot of the things a serious guy would say about things in Skylanders.
Do you have a favorite line that he might have said?
Yes, well, he said many things, and when I guess both in PvP and the regular game, a Skylander would eat a power-up, a food power-up, he would say, "Delicious," and that one lives on. A lot of times we would say that in the office. But a lot of the power-ups were fun to say, like Chinese food and things like that. It was a good, the announcers, man. I think I did early on in Skylanders, there was a really neat idea that some of our characters would not speak. They would actually make monster sounds. I kind of wish we would have kept some of that. Obviously, the speaking is a lot more engaging, but if some of them had remained monsters, I think it would have been better. Like the Eruptor had a sort of a voice that I miss, but no.
Yeah, I think the first Skylanders, and I'll have to double check this, I think there weren't voices for every single characters in Skylanders 1, but by Giants, I think they all had personalities.
Did we have? Oh, okay.
I'll have to go back and check the Eruptor. There was definitely some good voice acting on those sound effect like voices.
We definitely started that way. I thought we eventually, we'll see.
Yeah, I remember having a conversation actually with Eric Hirschberg about that, and he was dead set that every character should speak and have a tagline. And ultimately, I believe he was right in that kids would associate with those lines and repeat them. And in that, some of our monsters that didn't speak, for me, ended up having that personality. And but I do, maybe playing D&D with you, there were an awful lot of monsters we faced who mostly made sound effects, and I enjoyed them a lot. And this is off the record, but when we play D&D, every now and then I realize I probably shouldn't be blurting out exactly what's in my head. But it's really fun to apply 56-year-old pattern matching. Like at 16 or 17, I had no idea what was going on. But anyway, so it is a lot of fun, but I should probably not try to just read your mind.
Well, it's okay.
Okay, let's see. So let's talk a little bit about your history. Early on, my first experience with you was as a D&D player and as a great DM, but what stood out from everybody else we knew was that you were an amazing artist, even at 15 and 16. How did you end up being a great artist?
Oh, wow. Well, thank you. I don't think I am a great artist, was a great artist, but at that time, I was having a lot of fun drawing for the purpose of enhancing the game. It was just natural and fun to draw magic items and monsters and the maps. I had been drawing my whole life up to that point.
Are there other artists in your family?
Oh, yes, my mom. My mom's a great artist. An unrecognized great artist. She's both paint, multiple disciplines, but lots and lots of paintings. There's a painting by her right there. Wow. It's pretty cool. She encouraged me and helped me a lot with materials and took me on some excursions. She used to go to a watercolor seminar down in Monterey, and I went to that and tried to do watercolors. Very bad. It's tricky, watercolors.
Well, actually, I've seen some of your early watercolors.
Later. Early, my watercolors, the good ones, were sort of just like, I don't want to diminish it, but it came out good because what I was doing was coloring a pen and ink drawing most of the time. And to control a watercolor separate of pen and ink on watercolor paper and create some of the the desired effects, you got one shot basically, and then the next piece of paper comes out. If it didn't come out right, you can't fix it.
And what was the first job that you got paid for as being an artist?
I think Dave Hargrave paid me. I'm pretty sure. And so that would be illustrating his Arduin Grimoire, which was a pretty imaginative and cool book.
Yeah, so for those of you who may not know, David Hargrave wrote the Arduin Grimoire series, which really was one of the first creative equals with D&D in many ways. It wasn't nearly as successful economically, but it was inspiring to us. Not only did you illustrate it with, personally for me, in a style and a form that people have never matched. There's something about your illustrations that stands out from all the other artists in D&D. And even back then, I can go look at some of the illustrations that are online and still see that they're definitely you. And whether it's the style of your pen and ink or whether it's just what your characters are up to or their relationship with monsters. Monsters are on an equal, if not superior footing.
Yeah. I think you got to take their side in D&D. I mean, I think might have been Lawrence Schick who said it in some interview or other about how D&D was a game that gave players not an excuse, but the right to kill other creatures and take their stuff. And when, that's pretty rough. And I think it's kind of glossed over a lot of the times because the players are quote unquote heroes. But what they're doing, and I don't want them to stop doing it, but I think people need to recognize that there's another side to the story, and monsters are cool, and there's something brutal about it that's missing a lot of times in illustrations where you see the confrontation is sort of like before what's really going down is going to happen. The monster's going and the hero has a sword. But what's about to happen is pretty brutal, and I like to include some of that in my illustrations, just to keep it honest.
I'd love to. I don't know if it's possible, but show some images in the next to the podcast of like accompanying photos.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe we can
pick out a few.
Go back and forth and pick out a few, because monsters are definitely giving as good as they're getting in many of them.
I think that is not usually the final outcome of D&D games, although it can be, especially at conventions where people don't care about their characters and behave more stupidly and often are wiped out. But yeah, it's that outcome needs to be considered.
That idea of monsters and treasure, which is so common nowadays, but it was unspoken for a long time. I think those of us who played role-playing games, when you said monsters and treasure, that meant that's like what you do in life, in an analogy. But one of the first times I realized what you said, and I've actually never heard anyone say it quite that way, was my daughter Ariana and I got Baldur's Gate for Christmas, and we played it for like 2 weeks straight. It was one of the few times that we've ever just vanished from the family. And she was, I think, 11 or 12. And really got into it, played it all the way through, had a great time. And we were driving down the road a little bit after, and when you play a game like that for 8 or 10 hours straight, and then you go out into the real world, you're still sort of in that game world, and you're seeing the real world through a lens. We're driving down the road, and there were some guys, probably, people who got arrested for driving drunk, working in those yellow outfits by the side of the road, picking up trash. And my daughter said, "I wonder if we could hit them and take their treasure."
Wow.
And I think she was joking.
Joking, yeah, but the joke was fueled by,
Right. Everybody is just, can you take their treasure? I don't know. Maybe that'll be an alien race in the next Ur-Quan Masters game. That'd be a nice turnaround, actually. Lawrence Schick is a pretty amazing character. I wasn't thinking we'd initially talk about him, but lately, let's start out. Who was Lawrence Schick?
He was an editor and designer at TSR. I think he was already there, but very recently there when I started in '79. But yeah, and he was actually he was my roommate as well for a while. He and his wife offered to share their really a pretty cool rental And Paul, you were there too as well.
Lake Geneva, Wisconsin.
Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, yeah. So we were roommates for a while, co-workers at TSR.
Yeah, Lawrence was an inspiration to me as well. He was my boss for a while, although Erol did design while he was there and did DM games and compete as a DM. Mostly what you're known for at TSR was art.
Oh, yeah.
And Lawrence was head of design when I got there, and so I worked for him. And he had a lot of inspiration for me. One of them was, I believe I'm quoting him, "Stop using so many goddamn commas," which I hear that voice in my head to this day, but I still use too many commas. But Lawrence
I'm still trying to figure out the semicolon. I've never... You could probably...
There's however. I know what to do with however.
You could take out a comma and use a semicolon.
Start using 2 dashes. You can use 2 dashes for anything. I swear to God. Sorry, English teachers throughout history who have tried to teach me grammar. And sorry, Lyle Brennan, who I believe got several degrees in grammar, and I should probably learn from him. That's my daughter's fiance. But anyways, so Lawrence Chick was not only the head of design at TSR, he designed White Plume Mountain, a great early D&D module. He designed A4, which was that great module where they take away all your stuff and you have to run around hitting people with like beaver skulls or something like that. I loved that module. He was one of the 2 designers on Star Frontiers, and he's had a career like Erol and I. He moved into video games, worked at Coleco on ColecoVision and a number of PC games, and he's still insert whatever Lawrence's
actual job. Isn't he like the head of America Online game something?
For a while there.
Yeah.
I think he is now the official head of lore for the Elder Scrolls. But interestingly, he also, I believe, has the most recent translation of the 3rd Three Musketeers book that was released last year, a couple of years back, which I only know 1 or 2 people who've read that book. Anyway, so moving on. Let's see. So in 1980, after graduating high school, and did you go to college for 1 year, 2 years?
Well, okay. Graduated high school in 78 and went to Cal for 1 year before moving to Lake Geneva in 79.
So you moved from Berkeley, California, which is very temperate climate, to Wisconsin, which is not. What was that transition like?
Oh, well, I think you can imagine the weather was a big shock to me. I'd never been anywhere like that before. I mean, it's going to sound wimpy, but yeah, I was particularly struck by the idea that in the winter, anyway, if you stayed out overnight, you would be dead. That was a new thing. And then in the summer, it was humid, and the mosquitoes would just devour me. I mean, it's well known, right? Things like fleas bite everyone. You just have a reaction or not. But mosquitoes have preferences. And Paul, you may remember this, but I discovered that when we are together, they prefer me and not you. Why were we setting up a tent outside to practice camping, for which we never did? But we were setting up a tent outside at dusk, and I had to run inside. I was being devoured, and Paul's like, "Oh, what's happening?" So anyway, it was a lesson. But yeah, weather-wise, it was not for me. There were 2 months a year that were nice. I forget which they were in between times.
That's usually when people try to hire people in that part of the country.
Oh yeah, that's actually when I went out to interview TSR. I believe it was maybe September-ish, something like that.
I remember at least 2 other stories about you almost dying out there. One was a winter story. Can you tell us that one?
So, yeah, the legitimate one was the winter story. Mike Carr and other well-meaning people took me out at night, snowmobiling for the first time I'd ever been on a snowmobile. Let me drive one. I was amazed, but fine. So I was driving around on this dark lake following Mike Carr, and who else was there? Tim Cahoon, maybe? I can't remember exactly. But I was following them, and I guess they had cracked the ice and safely negotiated it, and I just went whoosh, right into the water. At the time, I was very scared. I leapt. Yeah. It was slushy, though. It was slushy, so slow sinking, leapt out onto the ice, And I guess it wasn't very deep, as it turned out, but deeper than a person. But anyway, so yeah, that was bad. Frozen legs. But apparently people had been watching. Some people living on the edge of the lake saw the lights of the snowmobile disappear, so they had already called people, and so I probably would have been rescued if I went all the way in. But yeah, don't do that.
Okay. Yeah, good lesson. I think they probably were looking out there going, why are people snowmobiling on a not frozen lake at night?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you should ask Mike Carr, what was he thinking?
Well, I think they meant well. They wanted to take, show the guy, the ropes and the funds of Lake Geneva. I think they
also locked you in the attic once, right?
Well, I don't remember exactly why I was walking around up there, but yeah, that wasn't nearly as deadly. That was just silly falling through the ceiling. I would not have died there, even if...
Just injury.
Yeah,
injury. Let's see. So when you think about the time you spent at TSR, and you were there for 2.5, 3 years?
I think closer to 2 years, spanning 79, 80, and 81.
What do you think is your favorite illustration or collection of illustrations you did there?
Whenever somebody asks me that, I always think about the Cthulhu mythos. In the first, the Cthulhu... Sorry. Whenever someone asks me that, I always think about the Cthulhu mythos in the first edition of Deities and Demigods. A couple of those pictures are my favorites.
Which ones?
Yog-Sothoth. He's got all his little spawns coming out of him, and it's a really nice, complete illustration. And then Cthulhu himself. I mean, I really like that Cthulhu. It's interesting to me, when I was creating it, I wasn't really thinking about him being gigantic, but being sort of in his dreaming city, sort of as more of a amorphous entity. And I like his intelligence in my drawing, as opposed to the more bestial depictions of him. He always seemed, I don't know why, but I always thought of him as more intelligent. I'm not sure.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, to be all-powerful super gods of evil, inhuman primordialness, you got to have some IQ, I think.
Yeah, I mean, not to say the giant monsters don't, but they don't seem like they do as much. I don't know, when they're flailing around gigantically.
Yeah, I mean, you got Shoggoths. They seem like they can obey orders, but they aren't necessarily like college grads or anything.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And what I remember when I showed up just about the time that Deities and Demigods was coming out, but we had to do 2 editions. There was the first edition with the Cthulhu mythos and the Elric art, and then there was the second edition that did not.
Yeah, they had to take them out. I guess they, for some reason, were publishing other people's intellectual property without asking them or getting the rights to do it. We were quite surprised.
Yeah,
that our executives were making these moves.
Well, the executives hadn't been necessarily high-powered executives for long. I remember at one point, my boss's boss's boss, previous job had been an exterminator and had become a big mucky-muck at TSR.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of local Lake Geneva residents getting pretty good jobs. So while you were at TSR and after, you've been, in the role-playing gaming world, you met both Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, the 2 people credited with inventing Dungeons & Dragons and role-playing games. What were they like?
Well, at TSR, we did see Gary on occasion. We didn't really work very closely with him. At TSR, we did see Gary Gygax on occasion, and I always got like a good vibe from him, like the vibe of a creator. Like we knew he was, sort of in charge along with some of the other executives we saw, but he didn't have that corporate creature vibe to me. And it was always nice to see him and talk to him. Especially cool was he was one of the player judges in the Dungeon Master contest. I think it was for Gen Con 8, if the web treats me right. And that was really fun. He really had this, he was like a warm, friendly guy player, even though he was judging me. Like I had other player judges in that same game. For example, Brian Bloom, who I got a very different vibe from. And actually, I did pretty well in that contest, but it was Brian Bloom throwing pepper at a monster, and then me get black pepper, and then me getting some AD&D rule that would handle that wrong that I think sunk me. So, but it was a lot of fun. Yeah. Now, Dave Arneson, I didn't meet at TSR at all. I don't think he was part of it at that time. But I did see him many years later at SoCal Gen Con to 2005. I'm not quite sure. And he also had a really cool vibe. Sort of he's pretty old at that time, but sort of a gentle, creative guy. But I didn't know him that well.
I wonder if they had any idea how much what they were doing was going to change culture. I certainly didn't.
Oh no, not at that time. Not in 1980, 79. I mean, it was getting big, but I don't think anybody realized how long lasting it would be.
Yeah, there was one day he did come visit TSR. I remember it was the day. Yeah, we tried to stage a coup. I don't know if you remember this. That it did not work. Spoiler. But we wanted to have a different boss at the top. I think we had a problem maybe with the Blooms. And we had decided that Mike Carr was the person we wanted to have be our boss.
This sounds vaguely familiar.
And again, like, I was maybe 19 tops. And so all of us had been given very small amounts of TSR stock that had voting rights. And by small amounts, I mean like 5 to 10 shares. And so the day came to vote someone onto the board, and it was a shoe-in for one of the Bloom brothers, as I recall, because they had so much stock. But Arneson showed up, and he and his lawyer sat in the corner of the Dungeon Hobby Shop basement.
I remember being there, but I guess I just wasn't aware that Arneson was there or something.
Well, we all voted when the time came, we all voted our shares for Mike Carr, who had no clue this was coming. Now, in retrospect, we put him in a horrible place. But Arneson didn't want to vote for Bloom, and so he ended up voting for Mike Carr as well, just because he didn't know what else to do, and it seemed like a neutral move. And I remember when that happened, Arneson had a lot of shares. Mike Carr's face, he was really not happy with how things were going. And ultimately, Brian Bloom just casually said, so I've got a lot more shares, so, I win. And you said, can we count the number of people who voted for Mike versus you? And Brian Bloom got very upset. Said, that doesn't matter. But he lost that vote.
Oh, wow. I wish I remembered that. Damn it.
This is important and something I think we agree on, but I want to make it clear. Bugbears, their head, is it a pumpkin head or a bug head?
Okay, so, I mean, there's room for both, in my opinion. I'd like to see more bug-headed bugbears, but the pumpkin one is totally solid. But let's not forget the bugbears from Trampier's work. Those to me are like the mainstream bugbears. I mean, and I actually had a chance to honor those or make an homage to those for Hackmaster cover, where the bugbears are winning. They are absolutely winning. It's carnage. The adventures have been undone by bugbears, and it's his. It might have been Sutherland and Trampier's. They both drew early bugbears with those faces. They're like, it's kind of like a combination of a Greek mythological painting where the tongue is sticking out and a gorilla or something. I don't know, but it's the third. There are three. I guess that's the lessons here.
Okay, excellent. So you were involved in role-playing games early on, but a big part of gaming, of course, was early video games in arcades. Did you go to any particular arcade?
Yes, we had a great arcade in Berkeley called Silver Ball Gardens, and I think they had, it seemed like a prototype of Space Wars, like the first one. I'm not sure exactly, but it had less regalia than later versions I saw, less official-looking paint and stuff, and that was a fantastic game. We also had, I think Yeah, and I think before TSR, Space Invaders also came out and was in the student commons of UC Berkeley, and that was amazing. I mean, rows of people deep before you could even get to the machine, people just watching and like, yeah, so that was Space Invaders there on the Berkeley campus. And then at TSR, I think that's when there was a bar next door, right next to the office, that had asteroids. Definitely had asteroids. And across the street, there was this old, weird arcade that had a lot of weird old stuff. But that's when Defender came out. And we had some fun playing Defender. But that was... I have to hand it to Asteroids over Defender, though. You could work Asteroids for a long time. But Defender would take your money.
Asteroids, of course, being based on that Space Wars core, is really near and dear to the Star Control heart. I've never actually played the original Space Wars.
We didn't play it?
Well, the
there
one
was
at
an
Silver
earlier
Ball,
one.
I think you're right. The guy who made the stand-up arcade version of Space Wars was a Berkeley resident, and he made prototypes that he tested there at Silver Ball. And I remember that crazy, like, big keypad that was sort of glued to the side to control the user interface for Space Wars. I don't think that was that looked really homebrew there. And he later also brought in his Oops, the contraceptive game.
Yes.
One player was the syringe of contraceptive, and the other player was the wave of sperm. That
Promising, but not as fun.
Nope, didn't get outside of Silver Ball. And then he did a 4-unit Maze Wars back. I don't know. If it was only there for a few weeks, and I remember talking with him there, and he was very disappointed at how hard it was to get 4 people on 4 different machines all playing together. But it was pretty damn cool. Yeah, but Asteroids, whenever I'm sort of trying to learn a new development environment, I try to re-implement Asteroids. And so I've recently found the source code for it, and I've been trying to relearn 6502 assembly language so that I can understand what the hell they were doing in there. But it's been too long, and my brain is too old to really decipher it effectively.
Oh, I also want to mention one of the greatest video games of all time was the 2-player version of Rip-Off. And we were lucky enough to buy one of those. Was it from like a mafia auction? I don't know what it was. But yeah, so we had that copy of that, an actual copy of the arcade game that served for many years. But that I recommend, if you can try the 2-player version of Rip-Off. Not the 1-player, the 2-player. It's really fun.
Yeah.
Cooperative game.
Was that Cinematronics Vector technology?
It was Vector, yeah.
Right.
And then you were protecting a little pile in the center, and you had your 2 ships. And yeah, it was good. Even had a couple of excellent, weird expletive bugs that would show up every now and then, and you treasured those. It was a good game.
When the little thing got stuck in the corner. Yeah. That little thing they stole. Yeah, it was actually a really great game, and one of the first instances of sort of a horde mode-like mechanic, where players are defending against creatures coming in. Yeah, that was great. I'm trying to remember. There were servo mechanical games that we played as well back then, and there were pinball games. Were there any other? What was your favorite pinball games?
Pinball. It just doesn't. I think back and one pinball. I mean, like there was one. Okay. I did enjoy one pinball game that was at a tennis sort of what is that kind of? It's like a resort in Lake Tahoe that my parents used to go to, and of course I would go with them because I was like 9 years old or something like that. And there was a pinball game there called El Dorado, and it kicked ass. That's the only one that stands out. They all just blend together, unlike video games, which for some reason don't blend together like that. I guess because there were far fewer, and they were all much more different from each other than pinball games, which are really... pinball enthusiasts will now kill me, but it's more about details rather than broad strokes with the difference between pinball games, I think.
Central core mechanic.
Remains the same.
Hit the silver ball.
Don't let it go. Keep it going.
Great. There's a museum in Rochester, New York called the Strong Museum of Play that has been putting together a collection of video games and quite a few servo mechanical games like old pinball machines. And if any of you are ever out in Rochester, I highly recommend that you go visit that museum. And if you can possibly get into their cold storage and look at some of their really old games, it's a great experience. Let's see, what else? Okay, bugbears. Oh, I got a question. So you were a very good video game player. Excellent reflexes. You had the highest score of people we knew. Did you ever compete?
No. The only game competition was that DMing competition at TSR.
Have you competed
That's not
in
a video game, of course, but
competition is a huge deal right now. That with the Overwatch League and League of Legends, I mean, there's bazillions of dollars flowing around through that economy now. Have you had any interest in competing competitively in computer games?
Oh, I would have like 20 years ago when I was really good at it. Not now. Yeah, no, I was the office champion at Microprose Spectrum Holobyte at Doom or Quake. It lasted, several years. I was kicking these young dudes' asses. It was fun. But I think those reflexes have now faded away.
After TSR, you came back to the Bay Area. Did you start making video games right away?
No, I went back to UC Berkeley, I think, for at least a year, maybe slightly more. And then I studied painting there. And then I went to the Art Academy in San Francisco, studied illustration for about a year.
At this time, were we starting to transition from traditional painting in ink to digital media? We can start that one over.
Oh, okay. No, there was something about that I wanted to mention. Oh, yeah, okay. No, first I went back to UC Berkeley and studied painting for about a year. Then I went to the Art Academy in San Francisco and studied illustration for a little bit longer. And sometime during that period, I got a chance to playtest the most excellent game, Ur-Quan, The Light and the Dark, which you might be familiar with. And then after that, I started working for a graphic software developer called Island Graphics. And I worked there for maybe 7-8 years, during which time I did do the freelance work for Starflight 2 and Star Control and Star Control 2. And then shortly thereafter, I started full-time, 93, at what was then Spectrum Holobyte, and became Microprose and Games.com. Yeah.
So how do I phrase it? Through all the schools that you went through and the different forms of training, were there any teachers that stood out as being particularly inspiring or helpful?
Yeah, I think of one guy named Baron Story, who was an illustration teacher at the Art Academy. And this was after I worked at TSR and everything, but still, it was both his approach and the class. At illustration school, there's not nearly as much room for creativity as there is when you're, for example, studying painting at UC Berkeley, where it's just almost too much freedom in a sense. Not enough freedom at illustration school, except for Baron Story's class. He had a really, it was the class he was teaching. It was, it was a place where now you were allowed to be creative, and that was, and he was really good at it. He really, it was funny though, I mean, and I was really good in that class. I actually took it, I think, at least twice, even though I wasn't getting more credit for it the second time. But it was interesting to see, not to say non-creative, but more mainstream illustrators struggle in that class. It was interesting. But yeah, he's a great illustrator, and I think a teacher I think of who was inspiring.
Great. Okay, I'm going to stop right now because I'm kind of panicking. Just want to make sure that this was recording.
Oh.
Probably should have checked earlier. And we're back. Okay. So what's the most difficult, weird, or unusual job you've ever had?
Crap. No, this is one that I don't think I had. Okay. That's one
I
I
could
did.
wait for the beep, beep, beep to go away if you want to think about that. But it may not go away. So
Let's see.
I'll ask that question again. What's the most unusual? Okay, I just have to live with the beep. That's fine. No problem. It's part of life. It's verisimilitude. Cinema verite.
Yeah, they made it.
What is it?
They were just trying to. It looked like they may have gone one way, and they were trying to go a different way.
All right, so
I don't know if I have a good answer, but I'll give an answer. I don't know how unusual or difficult this is, but it convinced me that I never wanted to have a real job in my life, and that was making crepes. Excuse me. And that was making crepes at the Crepe Escape, which was restaurant work, but it was very specific. You stood behind the counter, and you had this little crepe machine, and you would pull out the dough, and then you would fill it with delicious things. Excuse me. I know, it's interesting, isn't it? The what is that empathetic reaction when people, especially when people cough in the office? It's all of a sudden everyone's coughing. It's like, but it's only with coughing. It's not like with sneezing. When we sneeze, everybody doesn't start sneezing, but the throat and everyone,
yawning, coughing.
Everyone feels it.
There's social mirroring, and then there's neuron mirroring. Anyway, people. I was wondering about the folding your arms thing.
Oh, there's that.
That's a powerful one.
People, or even just like, it's not just that. It's like, and then go like this. Yeah, it's very interesting. So this this was not necessarily unusual or difficult, but it made me realize I never wanted to do a real job, quote unquote real, and that was making crepes at the Crepe Escape. You would draw out dough on this little hot thing, and it would heat up, and you'd fill it with delicious stuff, and that was fun. I ate a lot and gained more weight than I ever have before, because you could make dessert crepes and fill them with 3 times the amount that the customer would get of chestnut paste and blueberries and whipped cream. And there were some benefits to the job, but it was horrible at the same time.
I'm trying to think if there were any. There was making falafel, but that had its upsides through at the Greek theater.
That was fun, but mainly because it was also very limited. Like having to go back every day. Actually, there was the Crepe Escape did have some moments. There was a lot of cockroaches there, which you wouldn't know at first because they weren't scurrying all around. But you needed to go take care of them, and when you would go in the back and move a cardboard box, I thought that they had failed when they had painted the restaurant. They just left the boxes in place and painted around them because it was this dark square behind the box, but it just was a solid mass of cockroaches. Big ones, little ones, baby ones, and then we took the spray to them, and then that big square scattered, but it doesn't kill them. I mean, they're amazing creatures.
Probably just annoyed them more than anything
else. They just spread out in this vast army.
I really hope the Crepe Escape isn't still open.
I never saw a cockroach in the vats of food that you put in the crepe. I will say that. I mean, and I was right there looking over them. So I think even though there were a lot of cockroaches there, we didn't serve them.
That's good. You're a good employee.
Because I was eating it too. So I was looking.
Yeah. I have myself been served cockroach pourries here in Berkeley. That was disturbing. I was trying to be cool. I was with this person who I didn't want to be real uncool with. So it was like, hey, look, they've deep fried a cockroach and it's served. We'll just put this to the side and keep eating. And in retrospect, anyway. Yes. Did you ever get offered a job that you were glad you turned down?
Yeah. So this is I definitely thought of something. This is more about getting a job that you were glad they turned you down for. And that was after Micropro shut down, and then I moved to Games.com. Oh, wait, no. After Micropro shut down, I was looking for a job, and I went back to that graphics company, Island Graphics, and was exploring going back to work there. But they turned me down, and that was really lucky, because then I started working for Games.com, which then also shut down just in time for me to work for Toys for Bob. So, it's weird. That would have been terrible. go back to Island Graphics and miss that. Yeah, no. So that was great. Good job, Dan.
When you were at Island Graphics, you actually did a bunch of illustrations for the Amiga and then later for the Targa that were used sort of for corporate purposes. What were the illustrations you were proud of that you did back then?
Well, I did a lot of, I guess it was sort of demoing the systems. They were some of the first paint systems for the Amiga, and also the Targa, some of the first true color paint systems way before the Mac, way before Photoshop. Missed opportunities. But anyway, I think it was later in Island Graphics history when they were making some of the first really high resolution paint systems. And I actually, at that time, that was, I think, just after Star Control 2, where I was working almost exclusively digitally for a while using these high resolution paintings. And some of them came out pretty good. I was submitting them to SIGGRAPH, and they were in some of the SIGGRAPH shows. Some abstracts, self-portraits, some pretty strange compositions. It's hard to describe them. But yeah, that was some of those later digital paintings were notable. If
those exist in file formats that we could interpret these days, that would be great. I went hunting for the Targa Eagle, but I couldn't find it. I don't know if you have it in...
I don't know. You know, I might have some of that stuff. I had... Oh, that was really stupid. So I had this computer at home, but Island Graphics was cool enough to let me keep, and I had a lot of stuff on there for many years, and I had backed up some of it onto SideQuest cartridges. And one day that computer just died. And at the time, so that eventually I thought I had everything backed up on the SideQuests. And then in later years, I tried to get stuff off them. I didn't get everything off them. And I took that hard drive down someplace in the South Bay, and they said they couldn't fix it. I couldn't get it off, and I still have that hard drive. And I went to a place near work where they said, we can get anything. We can get everything. So I brought it to them, like, no problem. And then a couple of weeks passed. We can't get this. So I have this hard drive. I think I have some stuff that could help, but not everything, which is too bad.
That'd be cool to get that. Yeah, the early true color paint systems. I remember visiting you at Island Graphics and, seeing, we'd been painting with mice on PCs, but starting to use styluses. That was a big difference. And one of the questions that we have been thinking about, Fred and I, is when we look at making a sequel to the Ur-Quan Masters, which we're calling the Ghosts of the Precursors right now, is whether to do it in true color, which is what everything in the world has done now, just any color you want, or whether to go back and somehow try to find a palletized version. There's something about palletized art and color cycling that is evocative and of the time, but there's always this question about being too retro. What do you think?
I was just looking at some slightly earlier art than Star Control. Some of the digital deluxe paint images I made for Starflight 2, and there is something about that stuff. I mean, when it's so crisp and interesting. We did weird little tricks to try and achieve things like stuff faded into the background where you would just overlay an interlaced pattern of the background color to create the illusion of fog and things. And it's amazing the amount of labor-intensive every pixel matters artwork. There's just something about it. It's true. But you're also right. That's a tough question.
Yeah, I was looking at...
What about a race that's like that? Like all of a sudden you're in a true color game and
we are from the future. Yeah. We have all colors. Yeah, it'll be interesting to do I have some modern palletized editing software that's sort of a modern take on Deluxe Paint and Deluxe Animate. And I've thought about asking the programmer, he's this nice German guy, like, can you give me like 512 colors? And it's just like a complete... People stare at me like they can't imagine why you would have 512 colors because there's 256. And I'm like, but that would be better. You could say This is an upgraded, as far as I know, no one has done a game with 512 colors only, which strikes me as somewhere in there between 512 and 1024, things get really solid and you could have lots of color cycles. But it is very interesting looking at games now and how they do cell animation. And the evolution of animation, I think, mostly on the Mac, and the whole director/Flash evolution has led to this very cartoony, almost Illustrator-like foreground set. And you don't see many where they just take a bitmap and animate pieces of those bitmaps. That's much more rare these days. So it's be interesting to see which way we end up going. Let's see. Okay. Who would you say, as of today, is your favorite historical figure?
Fuck. That's another one. Nothing occurred to me. Maybe you come back to that one.
Sure.
I don't know. It'll be in the background. Maybe.
All right. An important thing to think about is, should magical things happen, how will you respond? Most people focus on the zombies or maybe getting 3 wishes or something like that. And by the way, if you do get 3 wishes, I recommend that you get rid of those blood-sucking parasites. And it may or may not take all 3 wishes to get rid of them. But here's one. What if...
Mosquitoes.
Right, but then their babies hatch. Those eggs hatch. So, you're going to need to use all 3 wishes.
Oh, shit.
I just hate to say that. But anyway, so imagine you had a choice. You could teleport yourself, as you are, with whatever you have in your pockets, to either Rivendell in Middle-earth or the bridge of the Enterprise, Captain James T. Kirk, the very first one. Which would you choose and why?
I think I would go with Rivendell. I think you would have more opportunity to, both relax and adventure if you wanted to. I know the Enterprise has some relaxing places, but it's not as big. I certainly I don't think there would be as much room for self-expression on the Enterprise. Also, I think in Rivendell, you could kind of do your own thing if you wanted to.
All right. Yeah, I think most of the people on the Enterprise seems like they had a job.
Exactly.
I did once meet someone who was a mom of one of my kids' friends. And when you meet other parents, it's one of those funny situations where the normal social mechanisms that bring you together don't. It's a random person. And this seemed like the most traditional person I'd ever met who probably had never thought about monsters and treasure in their life. And then out of the blue, there was some difficulty going on with organizing the kids. And she just said, "Oh, I wish I was in Star Trek." And I just said, "Why?" I didn't say this, but I know why I want to be there. But why would a normal human want to be there? And you said, "Because you have a job, you know what to do, and they give you the clothes to wear every day." I just thought, that's true.
Those would not be the reasons that I would choose Star Trek. But okay, different strokes.
Decision making was hard.
Remove all decisions.
Yeah, just do what you're told. All right. Let's see. So, Dungeons and Dragons appeared in the mid-'70s. It's now the mid-20-teens. Imagine we're 40 years further on in the mid-2050s. Do you think people will still be playing what we think of as social D&D?
Yes, not to be trite, but if humans are still here, they'll be playing D&D.
And what if we're, say, stainless steel cubes?
What?
Well, there's a good chance that we're all going to be stainless steel cubes.
Oh, okay. To survive the environment or something?
Yeah, or just like it's better.
Okay, that's different. There's a lot less expressive. I mean, the way I'm imagining a stainless steel cube, it has a lot less ability to sort of express individuality. So that might kill it off. That might kill off D&D.
Okay, well, maybe that's a
cubes, yeah.
good reason for us to avoid that. Mm-hmm. All right, so now moving backwards to...
Nice one. I like that.
Don't knock the stainless steel cubes.
No, there's
a lot.
Pluses.
They don't have to change clothes every day.
Nope.
There's all kinds of things. All right. So you've done a tremendous amount of, whether it's fantasy or science fiction art for paper and video games. What about non-commercial art, stuff that's for yourself? What sort of work do you do?
The most that I think most of that I would have done while at UC Berkeley studying painting, abstract art, which I still do every now and then. I actually have something in progress now, which has been in progress for a long time. Not to say it's very far along, but yeah, I keep it up every now and then. I do enjoy abstract painting. So that's the kind of personal work.
Is it digital or traditional media?
Oh, well, I've done both, but lately it's traditional media. That's mainly, I work mainly in acrylics for painting, especially abstract art. Although I did do several, like I said, on the high resolution paint systems by Island Graphics. I did some abstracts as well as some figurative work.
Great. You ought to have a show sometime. I don't know if you've ever thought about having a show of your personal work.
I need more. I have actually, it said somewhere you might be interested in showing one of those. I think that's cool. And the one I would really like to show, I need to roll out on the big one I used to have up when I had big walls at Bonnie Lane. If you remember it, it was like a big abstract on the wall.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I'd like to. I guess to get a image of that, I need to hang it up somewhere on a wall. It would also work on the floor, but then you'd need to get up high to. Anyway,
or mount a mirror to the ceiling.
Yeah,
yeah.
Need to.
If you have something like that, that would be great.
Yeah, I think that would be cool. I have some of the digital abstracts, I think, but that one is more. There's this one in particular that I keep thinking about. Not necessarily that I want to do that again, but it was a good representation of what I was trying to do. So,
okay, we'll see if this. I've got an idea. See if this works. What I want to do is, this may be really stupid. We'll see. I want to try to surprise each of the people I interview with a small section of freeform role playing, inheriting what has happened in the previous interviews. So we're going to try to do some character creation right now, since you're the first one. The first thing you ever do in a role-playing game is to create a character. So we're going to use things that people have heard of to help us work with this. So the first thing I'm going to say is you are going to pick a character class. It needs to be a job, trade, profession from, say, you can pick either Star Trek or Lord of the Rings.
So pick a profession that has been represented.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Of course, we can edit out this brain freeze part. I'm not sure that you saw this person, but I think someone was responsible how do you say that, Lothlorien? Someone was responsible in Lothlorien for the maintenance of the glowing moats.
All right.
Maintenance, care of, feeding, and distributing glowing moats, and that is my profession. Glowing moatster, glowing moat wrangler.
That's good. And I think residents of Lothlorien had lived a long time, so you've probably learned some skills there on the side, which we can get to later. All right, in terms of your appearance, you can choose any person, probably a famous person, from before the year 2000. What is your visual appearance? What person does your glowing moat maintenance person?
Did you say a famous person?
It could be someone, preferably someone that people know, or you're going to need to describe them. If it's someone, a family or personal friend, you will need to describe them.
Oh, Captain Ahab.
Okay. So two legs.
Gregory Peck, Captain Ahab, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Kind of limping around the moats, making sure.
Yeah, with the lamb choppy beard.
Okay, and you have a satchel. In your satchel, you may have one object from this house that we are currently recording in. What is in your satchel?
Yeah, I also said a couple things that I don't want people to know that I have.
Yeah,
I
maybe we don't
almost
get into
said
the cache of gold and or
couple
drugs.
of the shush.
We'll
Pencil sharpener.
Can you repeat that as I was?
Oh, I think I would like in my satchel a pencil sharpener, but not just any pencil sharpener. My Panasonic pencil sharpener that I purchased in 1980, which still works better than any pencil sharpener I've ever found since.
And any artists out there, I think, will share this as, for example, my wife complains about her pencil sharpeners for her various art projects every day. So you have a magic one over
I
there.
bought a couple of them over the years, to have it at the office, and I'm like, what's wrong with these? And I come home and I'm like, this thing is gold, man. It sharpened thousands and thousands and thousands of pencils.
Okay, well, I'm then going to give you skills somehow relating to illustration or rune drawing. Do you think there's rune drawing? Do you think that there is rune drawing connected with the maintenance of the glowing motes? Of
That sounds reasonable. Yes.
Okay, so that's good for now. We're going to hand this off probably to Greg Johnson, who will pick up this character and go on an initial adventure. But thank you.
Okay.
I could do that for a long time, but I think I've been left on it. Really.
One question you asked me. I don't know if you're going to ask me.
Yeah.
Not that I have. Actually, it's interesting. The different creative experiences question.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't think I have a great actual answer, but I thought that it would be cool to read some of the limericks.
Okay,
as examples of writing. Maybe it could be entertaining part
Great.
of the.
So we've said, or not actually. So you've contributed. So 25 years ago, you contributed to Star Control 2 in a lot of different ways: art, writing, play testing, voice acting. Now, when you go into those different creative endeavors, how's the mindset like? How is it different?
Well, this is kind of obvious, but for a painting or a drawing, the first thing is seeing something in your mind's eye or having an image appear, hopefully. Sometimes it doesn't, and then you have to try and make it work. And then for music, hearing like a phrase or a rhythm, sometimes accompanied with lyrics, sometimes not. And these things, you strive to make them happen, applying them toward a project or an assignment, or sometimes, and I used to keep a little recorder and a pad of paper by my bed because, and I've heard this is fairly common, not a common occurrence, but amongst people is right when you're falling asleep, but you haven't fallen asleep, one of these images or sounds may appear to you, and then it's on you, or at least for me, it was on me to get up and record it or write it down because I would never remember it otherwise. So that was sort of a tool. For writing, it's different for me. I've never actually written anything that wasn't gaming related, nothing significant. So those kinds of writings come with a less open-ended opportunity than painting or music for me anyway in the scope of projects I've done. But that doesn't mean they aren't interesting and creative. It's just that there may be some technical requirement that the game places upon what you're actually writing about. But you can still have fun and be creative. I'm thinking of some limericks that I wrote for a first edition adventure. And these limericks were sort of a spell cast by the limerickers, and once they completed them, usually terrible things would happen to the adventurers.
Do you have those limericks with you?
I'm glad you asked. I would actually enjoy reading a couple of them. I was thinking about that. You actually missed. There was an adventure where they fought giant ones, and they were much harder to stop. Let's see. Okay.
And then after you read the limerick, tell me what, if you can remember, an example of what would have happened to you.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, each limerick, and is an example of game-related writing. Each limerick is a rhyme, but I also, since I had to account for what would happen to players, the descriptions will follow. So this character's name was Clars, a good fellow, longtime player in my campaign. Clars's mouth became dark as coal, as from it emerged a black hole. Gravitational woes, should one venture... You try again. Clars's mouth became dark as coal, as from it emerged a black hole. Gravitational woes, should one venture too close. Where'd he go? All that's left is his soul. So when this limerick completed, and I think it did, his eyes grow wide as his mouth opens, and from it pops a black sphere that hovers before him. He cannot move, transfixed by it. He begins to spin around the sphere faster and faster until he is merely a blur. Suddenly his physical body and the sphere wink out of existence, but remaining is a shadowy presence, his soul which floats docilely in limbo before you. Maybe.
Doesn't sound good for Clars.
No, I think there was a way out. Once you... Oh, yeah. Yeah, the limerickers, when you kill them, would drop maybe 1 or 2 motes, which you could then use to restore the individual. So those are highly prized. Okay, this one was for one of the players at the North Texas role-playing game convention. Surrounded by tadpoles was Leo. Wherever you'd go... These are not easy to say. Surrounded by tadpoles was Leo. Wherever you go, they croaked, we go. So he leapt into acid, while the tadpoles grew placid. He ditched his new friends as he flowed. So when this one completed, Leo appeared agitated as he is ringed by dozens of tadpoles who follow his every move. He looks this way and that, desperate to get away from them. Suddenly he smiles as he spies. Leo appears agitated as he is ringed with dozens of tadpoles who follow his every move. He looks this way and that, desperate to get away from them. Suddenly he smiles as he spies a pool of dark liquid. He quickly leaps in. As he dissolves, the tadpoles look downcast and begin dispersing.
Poor tadpoles.
Yeah. Maybe
you can only imagine how that carried into their frog existence or whatever their development phase that followed
traumatized.
Was.
Yeah. Okay, one last one. Okay. Maybe 2. Not that you would use all of them, but we'll just do 2. So it's good. Okay. Nadir gazed up at the tower, where the maiden cried out for her chowder. As he handed it up, she snapped him. Nadir gazed up at the tower, where the maiden cried out for her chowder. As he handed it up, she snatched at the cup. To this day that fine stew they devour. This actually doesn't sound too bad, but...
Depends on how much you like chowder.
Yeah. Looking up, he spies a lass demanding the steaming soup he holds in his hands. He quickly scampers up the tower, delivering the dish. There they pass it back and forth, extolling its virtues forevermore. Yeah, definitely not one of the worst faiths.
What do the limerickers themselves look like?
Oh, that was them.
Oh.
They're like, they float. They're kind of like an evil fairy pixie thing with a distended belly of a malnutritious... They float, looking like a sick fairy with a long nose and a distended belly. And they take great pleasure in their rhymes. Okay, just one more.
All right.
I just enjoy this too much, sorry. Lavooth had a vision primeval. Methane burst from the ocean's upheaval. Not enough air for creatures with hair. Now ruling the world was... Lavooth Lavooth had a vision primeval. Methane burst from the ocean's upheaval. Not enough air for creatures with hair. Now ruling the world was the weevil. So that's kind of obvious what happened there.
That, I think, is really relevant to what's going on today as well.
Yeah, hopefully not. Have you been keeping up with the polar ice cap? I haven't.
Yeah,
I think
you know me, I do search the polar thickness and surface area regularly. I'm also following the methane outbursts up in the Arctic. But, you know, it's not good. I don't think you and I are going to pay the price. We'll probably succumb to something else before things go really bad.
It was really hot here, remember, in September. I mean, it was bad. No AC. I mean, I was like, did I tell you about it? Oh, no, it was, yeah. So couldn't be up here. It was 97 degrees up here. Oh, so I went downstairs where I think it was probably about 92, and I took off my shirt, and I had a bowl of water and a towel and a fan. I actually moved it. That made me get a new TV, which I should have done anyway, because I took my TV, put it downstairs so I could watch TV. While I sat there and splashed myself with water and had the fan point, and I was like, you know, if this is the future, I am just totally fucked. I mean,
head north.
Because if I had not been doing that, I would have felt really bad anyway.
Sleep
I had
ice.
to do that.
Just like Lost in Space, we'll need our sleep ice.
That's right.
Well, I really like the limericks. There's something about, so most of the writing I've done is also for games. But I've watched people who write poetry work on their poems. And it's interesting to see the layers of effort that go into the restricted forms with whether or not you're rhyming. There's usually, questions of rhythm and syllable, how many syllables you use and how they're connected. And you were talking earlier about the limitations from games and writing within them. Do you ever find restrictions are inspiring?
Oh, I would say absolutely. It's in exactly what you were talking about there with poetry or lyrics. The limitation is, so many fewer words than like in a story, even a short story. A poem or lyrics just has so few that each one becomes really important, like pixels back in the day. But yeah, and that is inspiring where every, this word or that word in this piece of writing that's only like 20 words long, it's like everything becomes really important. So definitely. That's the thing about the low resolution art you were talking about as well as the amount of pixels, the colors, just what exact color am I going to use and sacrifice one of my 16 colors here? I mean, that's missing, and not like in a bad way, but there's something good about having those restrictions that makes the art form completely a different discipline.
Yeah, I went back and looked at pixel art from the 4-color, 16-color, and 256-color era, and definitely the 4-color art from the early IBM is just horrible.
It's unpleasant when it becomes that restrictive. But
starting at 16, there's something about the quantized nature of edges, like you were describing. I was looking at Mark Ferrari's work from Monkey Island, and that dude dithered. Like he was born to dither. I don't know what he does now, but if it's not dithering, Mark, get back to it. But there is something different about looking at that work than looking at a beautiful painting. And I don't know if it's, kind of the rose-colored glasses of the experience we had back then. But when I look at it, I feel more involved in the image. I feel like I'm helping to make that image alive, which always interests me as compared to just getting the thing delivered to you completely.
Right, because it is, you're sort of completing it in your mind. Yeah.
There's also something about following, and this may be OCD-ish tendencies, but looking at the dither pattern, and if it's done correctly, it is very satisfying. And if it's not, it makes one anxious.
No, absolutely, especially, and no truer and more difficult a task than describing a circle or ellipse. And just, is it that pixel or is that? Sometimes it's impossible based on where the ellipse is in the image. But when it is possible and it's not done right, you're like, why didn't you put that pixel there? Yeah. Well, I keep thinking about the Tandaloo that I did for
Starflight 2.
Yeah, I keep thinking about the Tandaloo that I did for Starflight 2. That was one of my favorite low-res pieces of artwork, and mainly it was because of the dithering of the background Tandaloo, which was, merely just taking the image and then overlaying a interlaced pattern of the background color, which just faded them into the background, and it was just like, I don't know, satisfying.